Cool.
All right, we're recording.
Nice. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm Rob Kennedy. You might recognize me from such shows as Shows You Don't Watch or Listen to, or the Beta Kid Podcast, or Decelerator, or you name it. I don't know. And I'm here with my co-host, Chris. Hey, Chris.
Hello, Rob.
I am okay. So here we go. This is the new show we're doing together because we're crazy people and we thought we should do more shows. Chris and I usually spend our time not working and talking about other things when we should be working. And we thought this is probably a show because this is what this is. So we thought we'd break it up into 3 segments. We'd just talk about the whole point of the show is to talk about our enjoyment, involvement, life around technology, the tools we use, how they affect our lives.
Regrets also.
Regrets, mostly regrets. Yes, there's a whole section on regrets. In fact, we'll break it down so everybody who's listening, the first section will just be a little bit like our take on the news. Second session will be, we're just going to talk about some shit that we're up to. And then the last section will be the stupidest thing we've done in tech this week. And we probably should create a divorce meter to see how close to divorce we're going to get every week by doing those stupid things. What do you think, Chris?
That is, yeah. At some point, maybe what we should do is we should preempt our bad decisions by talking about them on the show. And then depending on the reaction we get, we can decide if we should.
Like a child coming in the middle of the... It's like the BBC. It's like the BBC. All right. So, all right. Do you want to kick off our first topic?
Yes. So it is Friday, June 7th. If I am remembering things correctly, Monday is June 10th, and there's a WWDC keynote. And so I thought, let's just talk about what we hope to see this year, so that when we are disappointed, we can...
Well, should like, how unrealistic do those hopes be? Because I feel like, do you want realistic hopes that Apple uses?
Yeah, I think realistic hopes. Maybe one realistic hope, one unrealistic hope, and one just like, here's just the littlest thing I wish they would fix. Yeah.
Oh man. You're not allowed to throw random things into the script of our first episode without telling me. All right, so I guess I go first then, and you go second.
Yeah, go. Okay. Go for it.
What do you
start with? One realistic wish.
Thing? Yeah. Okay, Apple's going to push the crap out of AI that they built some of and partner with OpenAI on. So they'll be like, look, AI, all the things. You need to buy machines because AI, all the things. So AI will be the marquee new sexy thing. Everything else will be iterations.
Yeah, and in this case, AI stands for Apple Intelligence, not artificial intelligence.
Exactly. And AI, Siri actually kind of works a little bit now. Maybe I don't have to remap my Siri button to I don't have that because I have the 14.
To something else?
But I can maybe use Siri. Okay, so what was the other one?
One, wouldn't it be amazing if this happened, wish?
Oh, yes. Wouldn't it be amazing? I think this is really sad.
Okay.
But I may have had a dream that Apple... Oh, no, I think I saw it on Twitter. Apple had an AI button. Okay, my dream... Actually, I'll tell you my dream. And this is such a boring dream.
Tell me your
dreams,
I wish
Rob. That iPad OS was something that wasn't crappy.
You're stealing my... Anyway, starts.
We know each other. Right? That's not yours?
No, you're I mean, basically, yeah.
But what would you want to see? What does a good iPad OS look like, really?
Well, that's a great question. Okay, so I think I've told you this before, but I use
the
iPad.
First episode. No one's ever heard this.
Yeah, I've never told you anything before.
Exactly.
But what I will say is I do use my iPad quite a bit with the keyboard, with the Magic Keyboard. And I've got the new one, and it was an easy upgrade for me just because of how much I use it. And it is my traveling computer. And it is the closest thing I've ever found to the 12-inch MacBook Air, which was the perfect machine.
That's the real wish that we really want.
Yeah, that should be my. Wouldn't it be amazing? So I use the iPad a lot, and I use it enough at this point, using applications that I use all the time, that there have been moments where I've done things like download desktop apps or try to download desktop apps on my iPad because I'm just like, I'll just install this and start using it, right? Like I just like without even thinking, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so what that tells me is, in terms of its capability, it's getting there, right? I don't feel any friction. I didn't even pause to think, oh, this is not my laptop, right? Now, that being said, recently I tried to complete an AI workflow that I've been working on. And so this is download some audio, transcribe it, do some stuff with the transcription, and answer some questions about that. Is not impossible, but so hard to do on an iPad right now.
Yeah.
If I was working on
need files, you just need
you need files, you need particular applications that don't exist. Like there's nothing native about what I'm that workflow, right? And so all these apps exist for the Mac, things like Mac Whisper and things like that, and they just don't exist on the iPad, right? And so I was able to cobble together different things, but then it's like, okay, do this here, and then save the file here, and then like copy it here, and it is clunky, as is probably the best way to put it. And doing the transcription like ate through my battery like nobody's business. Like I think it ate and it wasn't a long transcription, maybe like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, but it probably ate like 40% of my battery. Just
holy cow!
Yeah, it was crazy. Now I was using like English language model that was like not the smallest and most compact or whatever. I'm sure there's ways I can optimize that
comes on Monday, just for the
if I really wanted to. But just doing that workflow, that would have been actual work. Like let's leave the transcription time out of it. That would have been 7 minutes of work on my desktop. And it turned into like half an hour of fiddling with things, basically.
Yeah.
So that's what I think of when I'm like, make it, like I don't actually need Mac OS on my iPad. Would that be amazing? Maybe, right? But I'm okay with the constraints of the iPad and the optimizations that come with it. But doing things that are pro on a pro device that costs pro money is really hard right now.
I know. I can't. I take that back. I always want the iPad to do a good thing. I'm always disappointed about something. And I guess I'm old enough that I'm like, bring back the 11-inch MacBook Air.
Yeah.
I'll take M2 performance instead of M4. And I will be a very happy person. And then what was the third bucket that we had to...
just a basic thing that you wish would be fixed.
Okay, you go first this time, so I won't take it away.
Okay, my basic thing. Okay, I wish there was an easy way to insert horizontal lines in the Notes app. That's all I want. That's all I want. I just want to be able to put a horizontal line in my notes to organize things.
Interesting. For me, I want I don't know how to say this exactly, like more prominent watch update, like notification updates, because I'll get texts. I don't have the cellular watch. I'll get texts, and I figured out that Apple times it so that it goes on your phone, and if you don't acknowledge it in your phone in 30 seconds, it then pushes it to your watch.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And
I don't think I've ever processed that.
I think you have the wireless, you pay.
I do have the cellular version.
I don't know, so maybe that's why.
Yeah.
But I'm like, just tap me 83 times on the wrist.
Right.
When my wife texts me or my kid texts me, you know what I mean? I find that as a pure notification device, I don't trust it to do notifications. Then what's the point? So
I have a question to ask you.
I do.
Are you sure that you have not muted your wife? Because that's what my wife did to me. That's what my wife did to me.
It's very smart.
And she was complaining that she wasn't getting any notifications from me.
No, I'm on the other side of that equation. I actually turned on prominent haptics in the watch.
Right.
And I have a custom vibration tone on my phone for my wife to know that it's her. And on my phone and on my iPad, you can actually, the little notifications that come down, the little
Yeah.
shade ones.
Yeah.
I have, when I get texts, they sit there until I.
Oh, because it's like
acknowledge them.
you've got the like alert style versus the.
No, it's
Oh.
the blind one, not the old alert style, the one that comes down. But
Yeah.
you can make it so that it doesn't disappear after.
It doesn't
3 seconds.
disappear,
It
right?
just
Okay.
sits there, and you have to flick it away. So
Okay.
the only weak link in the chain is if my phone isn't somewhere, my watch may or may not tell me that the thing has happened. I'm like, well, this is not the point of the watch. Cool. Well, why don't we move on to another second of 3 topics?
Yeah.
Speaking of weird software and disappointing things, do you want to?
Yes.
Yeah. Talk about Bartender.
Yeah. Let's talk about Bartender. So.
This where Mac land.
Yeah, that's right. I'm trying to think about what's the best way to frame this. So,
Bartender
for those, Bartender for those who don't know, is a little app that you can run. Their website literally says "Take control of your menu bar," and I think it started out as just a way to hide extra icons. I found it especially useful on my 12-inch MacBook Air. When there wasn't a lot of screen real estate, right? And you've got 10 different things running.
An 11-inch Mac, you need to.
Yeah, exactly. On a tiny screen, yeah. And so, so I've been a loyal customer for years now, probably since version 1 or 2 or whatever. So I think the sequence of actual events for the average user was. There was an update that rolled out this past week that forced a certificate change. And again, for those who don't know, Apple forces developers to use a certificate that verifies who they are for all intents and purposes. And that's how Apple ensures that applications are legitimate, and that's how they can pull back an application or revoke an application's ability to run on your Mac from a security perspective. So. So there was a certificate change. I can't even remember. I'm assuming I just I didn't even think about it. I was like, okay, or something. I don't know. Or maybe I hadn't gotten the update yet. Maybe that's what it was, because it wasn't obvious to me. Anyway, so there was a certificate change, and again, grateful for the people on the internet who make note of these kinds of things.
It's called
I think it was Mac Updater actually. They just said what's going on. They dug into it, and it showed that the account that the new certificate was coming from was different than the original account, which prompted them to ask a bunch of questions. And as it turned out, the indie developer, formerly indie developer, hopefully now wealthy gentleman, I don't know, had sold Bartender to some kind of app holding company called Mac Applause, I think, or something like that, or Applause, maybe just Applause. And personally, my take on this is people should be able to make money on things that they worked on and to sell their business or whatever it is. But it was just poorly handled and poorly communicated, and there was a bunch of follow-up communication as a result of people discovering this. But I also suspect that if nobody had said anything, nobody would have said anything in terms of the folks involved in the sale. And the one extra bit of context that I'll add is, do you remember the Great Suspender, that Chrome extension?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and so that was where my head went, because unfortunately, the Great Suspender was a fantastic Chrome extension. No longer necessary, I think, because Chrome does put your tabs to sleep. Mm-hmm. But at a time in the olden days, before it did that, and all your Chrome tabs would hog up all kinds of memory, the Great Suspender would put tabs to sleep for you, basically, and reopen them, which was fantastic for things like tiny MacBook Airs.
Exactly. Actually, any Mac at the time.
Yeah, any Mac.
Because it was destroying labs.
Yeah. Especially those Intel ones. So again, the developer, I think, sold it, and again, it's his prerogative to do that. But I think what happened was the new developer injected a bunch of tracking code into it and things like that. And again, people just accidentally found out by snooping, maybe checking the source code. I think it was open source at the time, and so and it was officially banned by Google, actually, eventually.
That's crazy. Yeah.
And so, yeah. So anyway, there was echoes of that. I think this is a little bit less malicious, maybe. But I think the last thing I'll say is Bartender, the way it works, and what I discovered as I was looking at alternatives this week is that this is no longer necessary. But when it was developed, what it needed to be able to do is like record your entire screen, because that's how
Yes.
it does the hiding and stuff like that. And some alternatives that I've tried don't need to do that. So it's interesting that you like could have changed that as well. But yes, a suspicious or unknown organization that now can record your entire screen all the time, or at least has permission to record your screen the entire time, is weird. And sometimes even if it's a known organization, like let's say Microsoft,
That's a great segue. Good job. We're experts. We're experts.
it's not it's not a good thing. So anyway, that's my version. I'm sure you have thoughts, but
Well, no, I mean, I think you got you covered it all. The problem here isn't that it's selling; it's the fact that we didn't know, like, it was all done in kind of secret, and it had to be found out. And again, that stuff probably happens all the time anyway.
Yeah,
We just don't care. It's just, I think the fact that it's also it's like paid, like unlike the Great Suspender, you're paying out of your pocket for it. It's not as cheap as $30 or something US.
Yeah,
I don't remember. I bought them as well. I've been keeping up too, and I have tried some of the other ones before, just because I'm like, when the upgrade came, I'm like, why am I paying for this?
Yeah,
because there's open source ones, and I tried the open source ones, and they're fine, but I wanted a little more granular control, so I paid for Bartender 5, and now I see this. I'm like, So I think you've got it right. But the screen recording thing you mentioned. So moving on to that one, it's really interesting. So Microsoft, as part of their AI-enabled PCs, also has the ability to record screenshots of your screen basically all the time, store it locally on your hard drive, and then you are supposed to be able to pull up like a search box and say, Chris and I were talking about, Bartender. When was that? Where was that? What is that? So anything that you see with your eyeballs, the machine was taking screenshots and storing locally on the hard drive.
Yes.
I think it's called Replay. Was that the name of the feature?
That sounds right. Yeah.
And so it was really cool. It was part of their announcements, freaked everyone out for obvious reasons. And the thing that makes me laugh is I had been trying, there was a company called Rewind about a year ago.
Yeah, right.
Raised a bunch of money. I almost even invested in it, but I was like, that's a lot of money that I don't have. So I paid $29. Anyway, and so the idea was that it was supposed to be doing that. It would take pictures of all your desktop. It would join meetings surreptitiously and record those meetings. And the idea is, it's kind of like it remembers everything you see. Everything you see in here, it picks up, saves locally. The idea is not being in the cloud. Makes it faster, but also B, makes it more private.
Yes.
And these guys effectively, in some senses, got pseudo Sherlocked in a weird way with a different operating system.
Yeah.
But the weird part about it is that they've pivoted a little bit to just be like a meeting helper anyway.
Oh,
and I think I found a Mac app when they did that, because I was like, I still don't. I'll get to one thing in just a second, but I think it's called Screen Rec or something. Some guy with a Gmail address made an app that does this and stores things locally, and it's like $20 one time, and I'm like, that's cool. But the interesting thing is, what I found with this is that it's like, or at least Rewind, which I imagine would be the same with Microsoft. So notwithstanding the privacy debacle, which is like, do you trust Microsoft to record stuff on your hard drive? And I think I trust Microsoft. Does someone break into your computer and do bad thing? That's probably the more scary thing.
Yes.
But what I found was I didn't use it. Not because it's not cool. I was like, what am I looking for? And when am I looking for it? And how am I looking for it? Like, that's just not how my brain worked. With humans, it's recognition is easier than recall. And so for me, I never remembered that I had it. And it never became part of my brain pattern on the Rewind side to even bother to look, because it's just like, maybe that would change if it was on my computer all the time. But anyway.
Yeah.
What about you?
I think that like conceptually, I think it's a great idea, actually, right?
Yeah.
In a perfect world, right? But I think that, like many things that our industry creates, because we're often optimists, we forget about all the the red teaming stuff, basically, right?
Yeah.
And how all these things can be abused. And I think the thing that made it especially bad was their security was basically, well, nobody can access it because you have to log in to access this stuff,
Yeah.
right? But once you're logged in, there's like no encryption, which I guess like in theory means that like an IT person could access it if they like, if it was a corporate machine.
Yeah.
And then also it didn't it like basically didn't delete anything ever. So for example, like if you like, I don't know, cleared your browser history for whatever reason,
Doesn't matter.
that doesn't matter. If you
Yeah.
deleted an app that you no longer wanted to use, it doesn't delete the history of that application. Right.
Yeah.
And again, I can see positive versions of this because I'm like, oh yeah, just because I delete something doesn't mean I don't want to remember it, right?
Yeah.
Or what I did in that app or whatever. But at the same time,
They need a porn mode.
yeah,
The whole computer just goes into porn mode and like
Yeah.
doesn't record anything that you see.
Yeah,
Any
exactly.
stickers.
Yeah. So there's no surprisingly naive implementation, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah.
And maybe that just means it was rushed, right? As opposed to whatever. But I'll just leave it there. Yeah.
All right. Wow. Well, we've been going for a while already. What have you been, what cool things, what weird, stupid things have you been up to this week? Other than working diligently.
Oh man. Yeah. So I think a lot of work aside, and I have been actually spending a fair bit of time in the last couple of weeks doing more 3D printing.
Nice.
My first 3D print. I guess I've been around 3D printers for like since I was in university. Like I just like knew people who were doing it. So this is like,
Oh, really?
Yes.
Like
Yeah,
2014 is the first time I really came across.
Yeah, it's funny. When I was in university, like, so this would have been like 2008, 2009. I went to this like random person's like talk on 3D printing that he was giving at U of T, and he was talking about and like it was a paid talk, and at the end of it you got like a USB stick with all the like things you needed to do to like make your own 3D printers.
Print your own 3D printer.
Yeah, basically. So I did not build my own, and so but then at various employers and things like that, they were like around, and I think like by nature of it being, it's obviously technology, but like maybe adjacent to a lot of the work that you and I have done in the past. These things were around, and I was aware, and so it was actually during the pandemic that I picked up, by way of like least investment possible, a Prusa Mini, which is a fantastic first 3D printer, and served me well. Very recently I picked up a Bamboo Lab Carbon XC1 or whatever it is, which people have claimed is the iPhone of 3D printers. And it definitely feels like it. Yeah.
Definitely. Like you and I, when we worked together, we had one at our office, and I just remember like being awed for 5 minutes and then being like, this is the most annoying thing. Like,
yes.
You have to don't breathe on it the wrong way. You also need a Raspberry Pi to upload a file. You also have to design it. And it was just a pain in the ass. I love the idea of it. And then there was like a lull when they became not cool. And what was it? The Replicator got bought by somebody. Like got bought. And so I think part of it, the ecosystem, is as much the machine as what it is in the world, like the ecosystem that exists for it. And then, seeing your Prusa and the stuff that you were doing, actually the straw that broke the camel's back for me was I've been wanting to do it for a long time. And you and I had been talking about it, and you're like, Bamboo or Prusa or like something like that. I'm like, the Bamboo seemed to be right. It seemed to fit. And it was not actually that expensive. I got I ended up looking at the A1 Mini and the A1 because I'm like, I want to start cheap.
Of course. That's the right way to do it.
So the only difference between the A1 Mini and the A1 is really the size of the bed. It's literally the only difference. And I was like, my wife, I've been humming and hawing on it. And my wife bought these little 3D printed guitar. Well, it was little guitar hooks for my son's little ukuleles.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And they were,
Like to put
when
up
we
on a
got them,
wall.
yeah.
Okay.
And they were 3D printed. And she's like, they were only $20 for three. I'm like, $20 for three? I'm going to spend $1,000 on a printer to prove that you should do what. So, and then, yeah, like you, now I've been printing all the things. And
Yeah.
it's really dumb.
Then
we both got the color. We bought the color.
Yes.
What's also
Yeah,
interesting
the
for
AMS,
listeners
right?
is
Yeah.
AMS is that this is, I think, pioneered by Bamboo, which is a BAMBU.
Yeah.
Is you can not just print a single color, but you can have up to 4 easily.
Yeah. Yeah.
Colors changing, so you can actually print a print that doesn't just have a singular boring color. So we both have that in our printers. Yours is more elegant than mine. Mine's kind of hanging out beside the printer.
Well, I feel like I did your version of this journey already, and so that was what justified. Yeah. But I just realized, is the AMS the same for both of like the mini versus the other? And so you could just upgrade the printer itself, and your AMS carries over. That's great. That's handy.
It is. Yeah. But it's cheaper. It's $100 cheaper, at least Canadian dollars, if you buy the kit.
Right. Yeah.
So if you are, and for me, that was another reason to get the AMS. I'm like, not only is it so easy to print comparatively, but also the AMS stuff made it a compelling purchase. Now all of a sudden I can print things that look interesting, visually interesting.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to say, I mean, I don't know how much this matters by the time this gets out into the world, but it is their 2-year anniversary sale right now.
I saw there was a sale. I was thinking of writing them and being like, hey, I just bought something from you a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Hell, man. The other thing is, like, also my wife was kind of like, and rightly so, she's like, aren't they toxic? And I'm like, yeah, I guess they are. So just like being mindful of your ventilation and what you're printing and where you're printing it. Yes. I probably shouldn't have put it in my infant's room. That's dumb, right? It gets closed and has a humidifier on. But also, the other thing that I've noticed I don't know if you've noticed the same thing, is I'm not a designer.
Right.
And Thingiverse, when I started, 10 years ago, was the thing. You go to Thingiverse and you see cool models, and that seemed to have stagnated. But what surprised me and kind of inspired me, there's the Prusa guys and gals put together.
Yeah.
I think it felt like they sucked in Thingiverse and then built a community around 3D printing files.
Yeah.
And printables, I think, isn't it printables.com? Isn't that
That's
the URL?
right. Yeah.
There's a huge list of just things you wouldn't even think of. You're like, a leg for my table. Or an IKEA cabinet door. You can print one if it breaks. I'm like, stuff you wouldn't even think of. We should share. On the show notes or something, I have a list of ideas I've just been collecting of stuff that's cool.
Yeah.
And that is pretty inspiring too. I haven't had to design anything.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I can't design anything, or not without great pains. I mean, even that, I think we were chatting about this earlier today. Like, we own multiple copies, maybe, I don't know, whatever the right word is, of the Rode Wireless Go, and myself. And we both also own a little like mic attachment for it. And I was like, I might need to do this thing where I need a second one. And like, there's no way I'm going to get it on time because I have to like order it on Amazon. I went to look on printables, and there's like a version that someone has designed, right? And so like I can print, and it's like 2 hours. I think it would take to print on this thing, which is like amazing. Yeah. And again, the official one is fantastic quality, but I think costs like $60. And this was going to take like, is it? No.
Isn't it metal?
No. I think it's just like really dense.
Maybe
plastic.
I told myself it was metal because it was so expensive.
Yeah, exactly. But and it was like, I don't know, 2 hours and $1.60 of filament or something.
It's like crazy.
Yeah, so which is like that's the dream. I mean, that was the dream I was sold when I was at university.
Yeah, exactly.
20 years ago. So that's how long it takes.
Exactly. And so you printed some cool stuff.
Yeah, I've been printing. Again, this is like, it's crazy to me. It's like these little figures that have been designed by a gentleman. Or a person, I shouldn't say gentleman, I don't actually know. A person, available on printables, and they're these like highly articulated little like action figures, basically. And the crazy thing is that because it's just plastic, which my wife hates, by the way. That's the one thing my wife dislikes about this.
I get it.
Which makes sense. But you can scale them like infinitely, and so you're like, oh, I want to make a bigger version of this. I made these for my kids, and I made for my kids. Yeah, and so you're just like, okay, like I'm gonna like 200x this thing, and suddenly it's twice as big. And so I built like a little stand for them and stuff like that, and they have enjoyed playing with them. Yeah, I think like with kids, what I've liked about it is just like there's a huge amount of agency in this idea of like there's this machine you have, like it's a replicator, right? Like that's basically what it is, right?
Yeah.
And it's like you can think of a thing and we can make it together, right? Which is amazing.
It's also like I had the same thoughts about the plastic. I'm like, there was also, speaking of this week, there was like a study I think that they showed that like men have microplastics in their testicles.
Oh yes.
So it's funny because I had the same thought. I'm like, anything that was on their website that was food related, I'm like, I'm not printing food related. That's terrible.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, is this different than the crap we're ordering from the grocery store, like the Tupperware stuff? I understand that they're created differently, so there may be a more they're heat treated and they keep things in, but eventually these things leach the plastics eventually, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it's funny, I feel a bit hypocritical. I'm like, I would never print food things. Let me get this Ziploc bag out and put it in the zip. I'm like, oh, it's the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, there are, in theory, there is like food safe PLA that you can buy.
Right.
Which I guess is like, I don't know, maybe just a guarantee to have less contaminants or something like that. Who knows? I don't know.
You have a 5% chance of contracting cancer, not a 7% chance.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's cool. More on that.
Yeah.
My two things other than hard work this week was one is my Mac kept crashing.
Yeah,
it's been crashing constantly. I have a Mac Mini and it's just crashing. It's like
this is like your server, right?
I have a Mac Mini, in my basement that just like serves up content, perfectly legal, purchased content,
of course.
And so it keeps crashing, and it's not running very much. It just keeps crashing, and then it gives you a kernel panic, useless kernel panic, because it doesn't tell you what's going on. I keep submitting it to Apple. I even pasted it into ChatGPT. I'm like, can you tell me what these panics are about? They're just like, it seems like your kernel has panicked. I'm like, yes, yes, it has. And then just to add insult to injury, I have one of these SanDisk SSDs, the SanDisk Extreme Pros.
Oh no!
And for those who don't pay attention to this, it's pretty much 37 minutes after I purchased this, it ended up that the bigger, this is 1 terabyte, the bigger 2 and above terabytes were actually destroying data, so much so that there was a class action lawsuit on it, and The Verge had an article about how it lost all the data, and I'm like, that's too bad, because it was very fast.
Yeah.
And I had the 1 terabyte, and they even set up a website that like, go here, download firmware. And so I plugged it in, and they're like, you don't need firmware, everything's fine. And I'm like, okay, I don't trust it. I actually bought a Sabrent Nano 1 terabyte Thunderbolt 3 drive, which is even smaller. Not waterproof, but it's smaller. And I'm like, I'm going to keep this because it's a terabyte and it is useful.
Yeah, of course.
And so the other day I was copying files over from one computer to another because I'm like, I don't trust it to be left alone. So I'm never going to destroy an original copy.
Yeah.
And I copied, it took me 5 hours because I just copied from a very slow computer. And then I went up here to like copy it back, and it's like unreadable. I'm like, unreadable? How is it unreadable? So I wrote SanDisk. We'll see what they say. I'm like, can you just give me my money back for this? Because what the hell? And I did everything that they said. So anyway, that was. I don't know if you copy things, folks, don't delete the source until you've got it at the destination.
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to think if not recently. Excuse me. But I remember.
Yeah, that's old stuff. In fact, the very first thing I did on a computer, so old, I wrote an essay that I saved on a floppy disk at school on an IBM XT, like an 8086, my first use of a PC. And I hit save, finished the essay, and it got destroyed because it was a virus on the computer. And I was like, great. But it's interesting because the reason I brought the Mac, what's interesting about the Mac is that I'll see if I do this properly, but the from 2 or 3 operating systems ago, Ventura or one of those, they partition the hard drives now. So there's the operating system partition, the data partition. You can wipe the operating partition in recovery mode, install a clean operating system, and come back with. So I'm debating trying.
With the data. Oh, really?
With the data, because it leaves the data partition separate.
I did not know that.
It's built into the operating system. So you technically can actually boot in recovery mode. It boots into memory, and then you can wipe the system partition.
Yeah.
It's read only when the computer is booted up, but when you go into recovery mode, it becomes writable. So
okay.
And there's actually 3 partitions or something. It keeps the
original
installation operating system over there. And the dumb thing is, no matter how new your computer is or how old your computer is,
it's always the original.
It's always the original. So if you bought it with big, Snow Leopard, it's going to put it back to Snow Leopard. I'm like, really? You couldn't flash the thing?
Yeah.
That was thing number 1. Thing number 2, I just want to tell you a nerdy thing that makes me very happy.
Wait, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
What's your do you use Backblaze or anything like that still? Is that
I do use Backblaze. In fact, it saved me because I had a hard drive that died.
Yeah. Okay, so
yeah.
We should talk about that in some other point.
We shall. Anyway. We shall. But yes, what's on the machine is nothing. It's it's basically I could use a Raspberry Pi, and I do have a Raspberry Pi, but there's some stuff I just want to run on my Mac for reasons. The other thing that I was up to this week, and this is a project. It's a bit of a cheat because I did it about a week and a half ago, but I have a old Kindle Paperwhite upstairs.
Yeah.
And I use it to read stuff. Yeah. And I've been trying to I don't know about you, but I'm trying to separate my do reading stuff so my attention span gets longer than a gnat. So I try to push not only books, but I was like, what if I just read read it later, pocket, Instapaper, longer content stuff on my Kindle.
Right.
So that I can read an old person.
Yeah.
And so I did it on my Paperwhite, and I'm like, this is cool. And the one I have is 4 or 5 years old. The screen is glass, and it has page turn haptic feedback buttons. They don't make them anymore, and I really like it. And I'm like, what I really want is something I can throw in my bag or my pocket that's really small.
Yeah.
And so I know you have the Onyx Books Palma.
Yes, I do.
Which is like a phone size reader from a Chinese company that's really quite cool. And I kind of wanted that, but I'm like, it's $400. I don't know, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I don't know if I like the fact that it's an Android phone, basically, with not a phone. But I'm also like, I'm not comfortable scratching it. And I don't know, I just felt like, would I actually use it? And
and to be fair, I think if I had a device like yours, I wouldn't have gotten this. I've just never actually owned an e-reader before.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
But it is a different experience having an e-reader versus in a hand versus a book size one. Just
sure. Yeah.
The layout. And so what I ended up doing was I'm like, I don't want to scratch the Paperwhite, the unbuyable Paperwhite.
Yeah.
So, but I was like, I don't want to spend any money. So what I ended up doing was I got whatever the current, it's called the Kindle current generation, not the Paperwhite. The cheapest one. It's right here. So it's actually rather small. The actual screen is rather small.
Oh yeah. See? That's an okay size. Yeah.
It fits in your. It fits in your hand. It's It's got a crappy backlight. It's not that big. I'm not that big of a person, so it's not that big. It's very, very light.
Yeah.
And on Amazon, in Canada, it's hard to get hard to get the same deals we get in America.
Yeah.
You get in America, but they had a used one for $79.
Yeah.
Open box.
Yeah.
And then I didn't want to buy the case because I'm like, I don't want to pay $30, $40 for a stupid folio. And I was traveling the States, and they had an open box case for $13 from Amazon. It's the Kindle case. So I have a $100 Kindle, which is really great. But here's the funnest part.
Yeah.
Do you know what Calibre?
Yeah.
So just for those who don't know, Calibre is a piece of software. If you have ebooks of any shape, size, or form, it is basically like iTunes for books, effectively.
Right. Yep.
And it can download metadata, and it knows about Kindles. It can reformat books from one to another. So if you have an EPUB and you want to make it Kindle shaped, it can do it.
Yeah.
But what's really cool, I don't know if you knew this about Calibre. Do you know about the news function?
I am vaguely aware that it exists because I have another friend who is also like looks just like you, actually. Now that
Remarkably attractive.
Remarkably attractive.
Is it Seth Godin? Is it what's that
No.
guy's name? Galloway, Scott Galloway? Is it? We all look
No,
the same.
none of those people. But he has mentioned it as well. So that's the only reason I'm aware of it, but in no great detail.
So here's what's cool. If you download, it's a free app.
Yeah.
If you download it,
and open source, I think, right?
And I think it might be, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like one guy and maybe his wife or somebody who he really likes, who has the same last name as him. It has a news button, and what does the news button do? I don't know if everyone remembers this, but I think you still can. But when you were a Kindle user, you could subscribe to news, so you could subscribe to the Economist.
I vaguely remember this.
Yeah. Times, get the New York Times laid out in e-paper format, so it had a very specific layout, but it would be the content.
Yeah.
And so this guy has written a bunch of XML scripts, or I don't know what he's done, but you can find any publication in the world that you want.
Oh.
$0, and it will somehow magically scrape all that.
Now the secret's out.
Oh yes, our 7 listeners will. So I'm like, I feel like I want to read but you can also say like, I want the New York Times print edition, or I want the New York Times web edition.
Oh wow!
Or I want the Atlantic web edition, or I want the Atlantic paper edition.
Yeah.
And, it's not perfect. I'm not sure it gets all the stories. I don't think I don't think there's a username or password. I don't think he's doing anything where he's like taking somebody's credentials, logging in and stealing stuff. I think he's just crawling the website and downloading. Maybe he's using the Wayback Machine. Like, I don't know how he's doing it. But what I like about it is what I found intimidating about Kindles and stuff is you have to read a book. And sometimes I'm like, oh, book.
Yeah.
But I'm like, oh, reading the news, like in a newspaper, makes it more likely to be picked up and used. So anyway, you have to sync physically, as far as I can tell. I haven't been able to do it remotely.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah.
You just plug it into your computer, hit the button, it syncs all the things.
Yeah.
And you have news. And you can even do like websites. Like it'll do like The Verge, for example.
Nice.
Whatever the headline, like RSS-esque shape,
What kind of cable is it? Is it a USB-C? Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, my old one is not.
Fancy.
I stepped into the future. Mine's like, I don't know, 10 years old. Now they're like, USB-C? Ooh, it's so futuristic.
The other question I was going to ask was, so you sync it, you choose the stuff. Oh, I guess 2 things. One, I'm just curious, like, are you reading more as a result?
I've taken a bit of a lull over the last week and a half or 2.
Yeah.
But I definitely am happy, and I definitely bring it around with me. So no,
okay.
I was, and then I've stopped. Ask again next week.
You've been busy. That's fine. Yeah.
I'm very busy.
My other question was going to be, do you know if can you do highlights and sync those to I don't know, like a Readwise or something like that? Is that?
You can. Yeah.
Okay.
You can.
That's cool. That's handy.
It is. I like the idea of it, and then I find I never do any of those things.
Right. The actual highlighting. Yeah.
Like
and
if
going
Readwise
back
was
to
free,
it.
I would totally use it.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I can't, and it's also not integrated. You have to export. With Kindle documents, you can't. It doesn't just or there's most services you have to, or many services you have to manually do stuff. And I'm like,
oh really? Oh, I didn't realize that. I thought it just internet
I don't remember.
No.
Some yes, some no.
Okay.
But
okay.
All right. So before we go,
okay.
What are the stupidest things you've done in tech this week?
I wrote an application to record everyone's screen. No, that wasn't me.
$75. Yeah,
that wasn't me. So I backed a Kickstarter, which I canceled. Is really what I'm going to cancel my pledge. Because I was caught up in the moment. I was like, yeah, of course I want this. And then I was but it's really cool. So there's an organization company called MyVolts, and they create a whole bunch of cables, adapters, power supply type things for, I guess, really electronic music devices. Mm-hmm. So think like pocket operators and guitar pedals and things like that. Right. Mm-hmm. And so they've recently come up with this sort of modular system where you can use a bunch of USB cables, and they've got these adapter plugs that fit into the usual sort of positive, negative
Ports.
power supply things plugs.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were like, I think it's been successful and all that. But what they realized is the power supply, like the actual USB thing that you plug it into, is the weakest link at this point. And
Yeah,
so
makes sense.
they've launched a Kickstarter to like basically create their own USB brick, power supply.
Smart.
And so I think one version that's got like 4 different USB-C plugs for power out and just like a regular plug or whatever. But there's this other version, which is sort of like the leveled up version, which is the thing that they've done. And this is like, I think, more useful for music and instruments and things like that. They created a version where each USB plug that's outputting power has its own chip. And so what that means is there's no crossover and there's no noise inserted into the signal by the power supply, which is a real problem actually. And so like ground hum and things like that, like in theory, just totally eliminated because of the way that each plug is isolated, which is like fantastic, but not $500 worth of fantastic for.
Is it $500?
I think so, something like that.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
yeah. So, So again, like, I think again, great idea, and more power to them. And I think they are success. Like, I think they are going to be successful. They've crossed their thresholds, I believe.
So it's in euros.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I was like, this is amazing. I've run into this problem before. I want it. Yeah. So I haven't. So maybe technically I haven't made the mistake yet because the Kickstarter is not over. But yeah, there we go.
You're about to cancel. But it's funny too because I remember Raspberry Pi had that thing where the Raspberry Pis would fail because their power supplies were crap. And I think with the 4, when the 4 came out, they're like, we are selling an official power supply because USB cables and USB power supplies are mainly crap.
Yeah.
And so just having a clean, not crappy, poorly made, poorly welded, soldered, whatever thing. That's interesting. Yeah, I actually did. I didn't say this in those, but I had for a tenth of a second, I saw somebody had posted this really cool, like teeny little titanium knife that you could replace the blades with scalpel blades. So you could choose. It's like a pocket knife, but super, super teeny.
Yeah.
And you could replace the blades. I'm like, that's the smartest thing in the entire world. And then I was like, it was Kickstarter, and it was like by a company who makes this kind of stuff. So I'm like, oh, this is so cool. So I ordered it. And then within 10 seconds, I'm like, I have a stupid pocket knife that I don't carry. That's like a Swiss Army knife size, like from James brand. I'm like, that's really nice too. I never dull it because I never use it. Who cares that it's replaceable? So I canceled it.
Yeah, it's true. I've got a Swiss Army knife that I do carry and use quite regularly, but I'm pretty sure I've had it for like 5 years now, and the blade is still not dull. So
exactly, we could take it to a sharpening store.
Yeah,
that's cool. No, I everyone's, but I've always failed. All my Kickstarters have pretty much always have failed and never delivered.
Oh, really? Oh, I have a high rate of delivery.
Really?
Yeah. I know how to pick the
taking
winners.
All the luck.
I know how to pick the winners. Yeah.
However, I picked a winner. My dumb purchase of the week. I guess it's dumb. It's not dumb. I don't know. There is a computer. There's so I have a Mac Mini.
Yeah.
I have a bunch of hard drives because over the years I tried to be smart and use NASs and stuff like that.
Yes.
Triple redundancy. And I'm like, I find that I'm spending a lot of money on hard drives, and I'm not necessarily filling them. And if I fill them, then I'm screwed because I have to buy 4 new hard drives or whatever the number is to increase the size.
Yeah.
And then also they weren't dying. So I'm like, what is happening? And I know eventually that does happen, but I was like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
So about 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, I started buying individual hard drives because they were cheap.
Yeah, of course.
I was like, oh, here's a Seagate. And when I was living in New York, an 8 terabyte Seagate 6 or 7 years ago was $150 US. And I'm like, 8 terabytes for $150.
That's crazy. That's amazing.
So I have a handful of those, like 3 or whatever.
Yeah.
And the other day, one of my drives died, and I use Backblaze.
Yeah.
But the problem is, I had my content sort of splattered across 3 different drives, different content, different drives. And what I wanted is some sort of time machine or a backup destination where, yes, I've got it backed up to the cloud with Backblaze.
Oh, like a local backup, like
a local backup.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Okay, I see.
The second layer backup or the first layer backup.
Yeah.
But because how do you assemble if you've got, let's say, 3 8-terabyte hard drives? That's 24 terabytes. Do I buy one 24 terabyte hard drive for hundreds and hundreds of dollars? Like,
right.
How do you back up your content locally without spending a bunch of money? And I'm like, I don't want to buy a NAS, which in and of itself is $500 and underpowered compared to a Mac or even a Raspberry Pi.
Yeah.
So I saw Terramaster, which is they make NASs. They're not as popular as Synology or QNAP or whatever. I wanted a DAS, a direct attached storage. I didn't need the operating system piece. I wanted the storage piece. QNAP has had this 4-bay DAS forever.
Yeah.
But I was like, I don't know if this is quite right for me. And then Terramaster came out with this. They did it on Kickstarter, which is weird because they're a legit brand. So
but that's like the hot. Well, I don't know if it's the hot new thing anymore because it was maybe 2 years ago. But it's like, it's just the launch.
But it's okay if you're like a brand that everybody knows. But it feels like you're almost like adding risk to your brand. If you're like, hey, I have an idea, I'm making a NAS. I'm like, you're never going to deliver.
If people never,
even if it doesn't, you're just like, oh, it's on Kickstarter. They can't build a NAS. Who are they?
Yeah.
Anyway, so they built a DAS, which is insane. This is an insane DAS because I was like, immediately I was like, I'm going to buy this. But then I read about it. And it's like, it's got 4 bays for 2.5 or 3-inch drives.
Yeah.
And it's got 4 bays of SSD.
So 8 in total?
8 in total.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
You're like, cool, that's amazing. And it's a DAS. It's a direct attached storage. There's no software here. So you have to plug it in. I'm like, hey, what I could do is shuck or take apart the hard drives that I have, because I'm sure that they're all on their last legs too. If one died at the same vintage, probably they're on the way out. And then shove them into a container, maybe use a JBOD setup, adjust a bunch of disks setup or something. Because if this is the backup destination, if they all die, I'll just start again. I mean, sure, the act of restoring the backup on the same time might destroy the disk, but it's in the cloud as well. Anyway, so I was like, I don't want to buy a NAS for this. I don't want to spend $1,500 or something dumb for a hard drive bucket. And so I was going to buy this, but this is so stupid, Chris. This is... If you actually look at the specs, first of all, it has USB, it's the OG 3.1 USB connection. C. So it's like 5 gigabits a second, not 10. And it's certainly not Thunderbolt. They did it to keep costs low. But here's the other thing. 4 bays in the front, 4 bays on the side. The only thing you can do with any of them is the first 2 3-inch drive bays. You can RAID 0, 1, or JBOD.
What?
That's it.
Just the first 2?
Just the first 2.
Oh, that's so weird.
Everything else are individual hard drives.
Oh, weird.
So
I thought it was going to be like a Drobo or something like that.
That's what I want. I'm like, take all of the gigabytes, terabytes, and make a big pool of stupid. And so I was like, I want to buy this, but that's stupid. And I kept going back and forth on it. But then I realized, and each of the SSDs follow the same thing. Each one is a separate one, and because it's a 3.1 a 5 gigabit connection, you can't even max it. It's really dumb. So everyone, like a lot of the YouTube reviews are like, what is this for? Who is going to buy this? Stupid people like me. This is my theory, and it better work. Although it was 299 Canadian dollars, so it was like not end of days expensive. Is I'm going to use Mac OS to JBOD the whole damn thing.
Oh, interesting.
So do software RAID effectively. JBOD.
Because
if it doesn't work.
Yeah, because you can mount all of them via USB.
We'll find out.
Or in theory.
We'll find out if
do you think they're just going to release like an update later on and be like, oh, we wasn't ready?
I don't know, man, because the physical switch for the RAIDs is on the box.
Oh,
and it's painted on the chassis. The 0, it has a little thing.
Dip switch or whatever,
It's a little you need a key to turn
I think they're called dip switches. I think that's what they are.
Yeah, but they're not they're not dip switches where you flick them in a particular order. It's like a circular knob.
Oh, that one. Okay. Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So unless there's some secret hardware they're not telling anybody about, it's a stupid purchase, and it might not even do the thing I want it to do. And the other thing for our listeners, I know I've spent way too long on this, but shucking, which is the process of taking hard drives out of the box, like you buy an external hard drive.
Oh, that's what it's
you
called.
Rip it open. That's what it's called, like a clam.
Yeah.
Or a shell. You pull out the shell, and there's often a hard drive inside. Word to the wise, at least I haven't looked recently, but Western Digital hard drives, recently all hard drives, I think, but up for years, they have a non-SATA connection at the back of them. So the reason what people were doing is they were buying them because it was cheaper to buy an external drive versus an internal drive.
Yeah.
And then ripping them apart. And so the hard drive companies caught on, and they basically soldered on a proprietary connector inside the external hard drive. So if you ripped it open, you'd be stuck with a proprietary connector. So
terrible things.
There's a lot of very bad decisions that are happening now. And a lot of things have to go right, including me not electrocuting myself or catching something on fire.
So the Kickstarter has to succeed.
It just succeeded today.
Oh, it did? Oh, okay, all right. Well, that's
and they're like, we're totally building them. I'm like, I totally believe you.
When's the What's the timeline? When's the delivery?
July.
Oh, like next
July
month?
24th. Yeah. And they're like, they've got them out to reviewers. If you look on YouTube, you will find it's like the Terramaster D8 Hybrid is the name of it.
Okay.
So it exists in the world. People are using it. And so, again, it's a legitimate company. So I'm like, I've basically, it's like I've found like boring normal companies to back on Kickstarter because they're the only thing.
That's the way to do it, man.
Anyway, so like next week, let's find out whether we are still together with our partners. And hopefully everybody enjoyed this. Send us your feedback at an undisclosed location we won't tell you about.
You can,
let's see if we're still...
Find us on the interwebs. Let us know. Or put it in the comments. I don't know. That's what people do, right? Like and subscribe.
Exactly. Like and subscribe. Don't forget. Bye.
Bye.